That?
Nope. Don't ask me.
No one's good? Did I hear that out there? No one's good except God alone? Did you really mean that? We're good? Fine? You can say fine. I'm doing well.
Awful.
Awful? I'm doing awful. I can hear that too. I'm doing awful. Yeah? I can hear that too.
I'm doing great.
Yeah? All right. It is good to be here. It really is. It's good to be here. Yesterday, I had the honor of going to Columbia, South Carolina, to a funeral of a friend and a colleague, Damien Jean-Baptiste. Very moving time. Most of all, it was his wife, that got up and shared. And, the thing that touched me the most is she said, "This is the man that taught me how to live. But this is also the man that taught me how to die." And she talked about his steadfast and resolute faith to his last breath. That's how we want to go. That's why we're here. I mean, I appreciate the fellowship. I love all you guys. I appreciate the fun that we have. I appreciate everything that we've got in life. But man, I tell you what, if we're doing all this and our last breath isn't about praising God, then we are going to miss something in the end.
Yeah.
So again, it was an honor to be able to go to visit him. His end was in sight for him. He knew it. He knew it. Why? Because that's what his diagnosis was. They said, "You've only got a year to live." He lasted just a few weeks, actually, when they diagnosed him with a year. And I don't know all the stories, but what do you think he did in those last few weeks of his life? A lot of times we think, if we're close to the end, we're just going to kick it and take it easy. That's not what he did. He used that time to be more diligent in sharing his faith. He used that time to be more passionate in the way that he loved. He used that time to give and to give and to give until it was all gone.
Yes.
That's exactly how Jesus felt walking into Jerusalem.
Yes.
That it wasn't a time to relax. It wasn't a time to let go or let down or take it easy. And this morning we get to read a little bit about the end being in sight for Jesus. In Luke 19, he comes into Jericho. Right? Now, where did we hear Jericho before?
We just left Jericho.
That's right, in Joshua, the walls of Jericho. Jericho fell. It didn't lay in rubble, they rebuilt it. And it's a city, and it was the first city that they saw when they did what? When they crossed the Jordan River. That's exactly right. Jericho was literally right on the Jordan, pretty much. And it was in a valley. And this valley came down, and there was Jericho and the Jordan River. And at the gates of Jericho, you can turn your back to see the river, and you can turn the other way to see the mountain, Zion, Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is in sight. Jesus' end is in sight. And Jesus is walking into what is described as the fattest city in Palestine. Jericho was one of the most plush cities in Palestine. The palm trees were beautiful and they gave off a scent. They called it the perfumed city. It was a beautiful place to live. All of the trade that came over the water came into Jerusalem, came through Jericho. And so what did that mean? Lots of money. They were most famous for their dates. The Romans would come, the Roman kings, the Caesars would come from all over the place to get the dates from there and distribute them. They were one of the most expensive things in the country at the time. You know, it was a fat city, very plush. So, but because a lot of trade came in, you know, and every time you came into a city, who was standing at the gates? Tax collector. That's exactly right. You know, so every wharf had a tax collector. And so we see a guy here who was the kind of the chief of the city. He was the overall of the tax office. So he got a piece of everything that came in and out of that city. So this guy's a wealthy man. His name was Zacchaeus. Let's read about him. Verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was. Because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. Why do you think he was so desperate to see Jesus? Okay, heard a lot of cool stuff about him. What else do you think? What?
His wealth wasn't satisfied.
He was missing something. His wealth wasn't satisfied. You know what? Wealth is very deceitful, isn't it? Wealth is very deceitful. We think, and when we drive by houses, and man, I tell you what, when we lived in LA, we lived by some wealthy people. You know, fact is, everybody in LA lives by wealthy people because they're all over the place. There's a lot of wealth in that city. It's amazing. But you can drive by some of these places, and they are palatial. I'm not kidding. You know, you drive up through Beverly Hills, you drive into Brentwood, you go up Palos Verdes, PV. Oh, man! You look at these places, and they're only on like 5 acres. But 5 acres in LA, oh. You know, that's like, you know, going out here and having about 5,000 acres. If you have 5 acres in LA, you got it. And there's these big, and when you're driving by, you just can't help but think, man, they got no problems. Wow. Isn't it funny? Wealth is very deceitful. We drive by on the way to Mark's house. There's a house we call the Castle House. You know the house I'm talking about on Elkhorn? You drive up on Elkhorn, and there's this house. You know, we just call it the Castle House. And you know, but the funny thing is whenever we drive by, Sam's in the car, whomever, you know, we got Sam's friend in the car. They're like, "Wow, look at that house!" It all looks like a castle. It's so funny. Well, we think wealth solves problems. Well, a lot of times that is a fact. It creates more. But see, we think, well, you know, we think a guy, oh, here's this guy, Zacchaeus. What issues could he have? Good grief, he's wealthy. What issues could he have? That's right, he's a Jewish tax collector.
He's short.
He's short! Thank you! Yeah, I mean, seriously, think about it. That's an issue in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're a man in this world and you are below average height, you got a chip on your shoulder. It's the truth, isn't it? You feel like you got something to prove. You got to realize, where I grew up, I was short. You are short. Get out of it. Why? No, but seriously, where I grew up, I was short. And I know, I mean, I felt it my whole life. I was skinny. I graduated high school at $1.35. Okay? I was an itty bitty guy. And I had a chip on my shoulder. I understand what Zacchaeus was going through. I understand what he felt.
You know, being tall is not that much easy, you know.
I tell you what, when I moved to Guam, yeah, you down there. I'm sure Zacchaeus sure Zacchaeus had self-esteem issues. He had friendship issues. I mean, just the nature of his job. People hated him. His money didn't solve any issues. It really did. It didn't make him happy. He wanted something so much more. So he was looking for Jesus.
Yes.
He was looking for something more, and he was actually a little desperate about it. Fact is that he braved the crowd alone. I'm sure that crowd wasn't just not letting him through. I'm sure they were.
Cheap shots.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they were taking cheap shots. He was probably battered through. I mean, he was a hated man. And if anybody got him alone, yeah, they were going to take shots at him. And he gets to the point where he has to run up ahead and he sees a tree. He says, you know what, the only way I'm going to get an opportunity even to see Jesus is to climb that tree. A man of his wealth and stature in the world was willing to humble himself enough to be able to climb up in that tree. This man was desperate to see Jesus. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you were desperate? Now, see, we live in a world, we live in a time, we live in a country where Jesus is everywhere. We live in a place, literally, where Jesus is everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, this is not like the Northeast, where he's really not hardly anywhere. Jesus is everywhere here. He is so easily accessed, but the question is, are you desperate? When's the last time you were desperate for Jesus? Now let me ask you another question. What did you do? I remember being a young Christian, being desperate for Jesus. We had a mountain right behind my house. And I remember climbing the mountain just because I wanted to be up and closer because Jesus climbed the mountain. I remember that. I was like, oh, whatever. I'm going to take a whole Saturday and do it. Why? Because I just want to be with Jesus. I remember days that I would go by and it would literally be 5-6 hours worth of prayer just because I was desperate to be with Jesus. I remember times when people were sick, people that I love very much, and I would have to just fall on my knees because I was desperate to be with Jesus. But the scary thing is those times aren't regular. And I think there is a desperation that we all need to feel because we get lulled into this comfortable world that we live in. And we live in a comfortable world. There's not one of you that's not comfortable in this life. We all have a house with a heater in it, with an air conditioner in it, most of us. We all have a choice of clothing to wear. We all have a choice of food in our cupboards. We live in a very comfortable world. We all have friends that we can call upon. We live in a very comfortable world. It's funny, when you travel outside of America and you tell people that you're from America, if you're in a third world country, people's eyes get big. They literally, there's a lot of this world that literally thinks that Americans roll in gold. Not kidding. They look at you and they're like, we are some of the most fortunate people on earth. But what that does for us is that robs us of our desperation for Christ.
Right.
Yes.
Because it's so easy for us to trust the world. It's so easy for us to trust the wealth. It's so easy for us to trust in other things, not Jesus. And we lose our desperation. Well, look what happens. Verse 5. Well, he was wealthy. He wanted to see Jesus. He was coming, climbed the tree. Verse 5. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of sin. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here now I give half my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost.
Yes.